guys, so today's video is all about my application to medical school in the UK and I hope you enjoy. So for some background info before I start, I applied to medical school in sort of October, September 2019, so well before COVID started, or at least before we knew about it in this country. And I was in my second year of sixth form college in the UK. I was at quite a large state school college. It was a separate college from my secondary school. I was studying maths, biology and chemistry A-levels, and I also was doing an EPQ on the side. I had a job at the weekends as a ward host in a hospital, so basically like a ward waitress. I had work experience in hospital at just a few odd bits and pieces, and then I had volunteering in a nursing home and at a disability play centre, which I did every week or every other weekend. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about in terms of the application process was sitting the entrance exams. For those of you that don't know, in the UK you have to sit 2 entrance exams for undergraduate medical school, or at least one of the 2. It's basically that you can't get into medical school without sitting one or other, and depending on where you apply you could end up taking both of them. So the 2 that you have to sit are the UCAT and the BMAT. I sat both. I sat the UCAT in July and the BMAT in August, and I ended up applying for 2 unis that required the BMAT and 2 that required the UCAT. I will do a separate video on the UCAT and the BMAT just to explain a little bit more about each one, and I'll put a link down below with a really good website. It's called the Medic Portal, and basically if you're applying to medical school, it's like really good. It's a free resource, you should definitely make use of it. This isn't an ad or anything, I used it, and I just want to tell you guys it's really useful. It has a list of all of the medical schools that require the BMAT, of which there are 7 main ones in the UK. So I think it's like Leeds, Lancaster, Oxford, Cambridge, UCL, Imperial. Oh, I forgot the other one. I'll have to put the link below. I think, oh, Brighton and Sussex. It's Brighton and Sussex. Yeah, okay, that's 7. And then the 8th one is Kiel, but they only require it if you're an international student. But the website explains all about that, so I'll put that below. And also there's a list of UCAT unis. Most of the medical schools in the UK require the UCAT, so pretty much you will have to sit the UCAT if you're applying for medical school. But I sat both, so I sat the UCAT in July and the BMAT in late August. There's another sitting for the BMAT you can do in sort of late October, early November, but if you do that one you won't find out your result before you apply to uni, so I wanted to know what I got before I applied, so hence me sitting them both in the summer. The 4 unis I ended up applying to were Exeter and Nottingham with the UCAT, and then Imperial College London and Cambridge with the BMAT. So after I sat the UCAT and the BMAT, the next thing I focused really quite heavily on was getting my personal statement sorted. You get your UCAT results straight away, but the BMAT you have to wait, and so in the meantime when you're waiting for the BMAT and preparing to sit it, my advice would be to focus on your personal statement. So I started writing mine in May, and I did a first draft in May, and then sort of the UCAT took over in June, July. Then between the UCAT and the BMAT I did some more. I did a second draft, sat the BMAT, and then after the BMAT I did my third draft. I will do another video about that as well on my personal statement, but ultimately it was just a case of tweaking it as you go along. I think I did work experience after I started my first draft, so once I did the work experience I then like tweaked it and added that into my personal statement. So that's kind of a thing I did throughout the process, but I had it done by the beginning of September. Another thing that I did during the summer was I went to open days. So the open days, kind of the ones I went to anyway, they were from May to August. I think I went to Exeter first, Cambridge and Oxford are in July, and then there's a few other ones, most of them are in June, but a couple are in August. So I went to all of the 4 unis that I applied to, and I also looked at Southampton. And for those of you that don't know, in the UK you can only apply to 4 medical schools in one application round. So I applied to my 4, but I did look at Southampton as well. The reason I guess I didn't apply there, I didn't like it as much, I guess. But all of the courses are good. I made a shortlist. I know 5 doesn't sound like a lot of unis to look at when you only apply to 4, because it meant I only looked at 1 extra, and if I didn't like 3 of them then I would have been a bit stuck. But I made a shortlist before I went to the open days, which meant I didn't have to go to like 10 open days, because I already had narrowed down the unis that I thought I would quite like to just 5. And then after all of that, I finally put in my UCAS application. If you're applying to Oxford, Cambridge or medical school, you had to get in an early application. The actual UCAS deadline is like middle of October, but we got ours in September. A lot of people sit the BMAT in October, or November, which means that you have to wait for them to have their result and for the universities to get the BMAT result from that round before the universities decide who they want to interview. It's a bit different with the UCAT. The UCAT result gets sent off sort of as soon as your application goes through. So the UCAT unis you can hear back from a bit earlier in terms of who they want to interview, but it's still considerable wait and it's not fun. From the middle of November onwards, you start getting invitations to interview, and you can't really go to medical school in the UK without interviewing. Obviously, if you want to be a doctor, it's quite important that you have certain skills as well as just being academic. You need to have the communication skills as well. And the interviews are a good way for universities to check whether or not a student has that kind of aspect as well. So, I mean, because anyone can say on their personal statement, yeah, like I'm really good at speaking to people, I'm really empathetic, but the only way the universities can figure that out is if they actually meet you in person, I was going to say, but obviously this year it's been a bit different. But an interview, whether it's online, face-to-face, whatever, you have to do one. So I got invited to interviews by all 4 of the universities I applied to. I think the first one I heard from was Exeter, then I heard from Cambridge, Nottingham and Imperial. And sometimes they don't give you much notice about your interviews. So for example, I heard from Nottingham on the 3rd of December, and then my interview was on the 19th of December. So it's like 2 weeks notice pretty much. Start preparing for interviews ahead of any invitations in case you do get invitations and the interview's like a week's time. You don't want to be cramming, and you've probably got mocks at college coming up. I mean, I certainly did. I had 2 before Christmas, 2 after Christmas, and then once you do that, it's a case of waiting again. And because the process for interview is spread out over a few months, it's not always the case that you'll interview and then hear from every university in that order. So I had an offer from Cambridge before I had my interview at Exeter. It really varies uni to uni, so maybe if you want to consider, are you desperate to find out whether or not you got in, have a look and see online if the universities are quite quick at releasing who they've made an offer to. If you're the kind of person that doesn't mind waiting, you can wait until March, that's fine, go for it. I didn't really have a preference, so I know that for Cambridge they give out their offers. Cambridge and Oxford give out offers in January. Imperial didn't give out any offers until like March, so it was quite a wait for that one, which means you can't really make your decision, your UCAS decision potentially until March, which is quite late, but yeah, if you don't mind, go for it. So then by March, really pleased, I had 4 offers, and then, well, you guys know what happened in March. We had lovely COVID come along, and suddenly all of the offer holidays were cancelled. Everything about like coming to visit the unis before you arrive, you know, that was all gone. We couldn't sit our exams, so A-levels were kind of out the window. Before COVID happened, I wasn't so fussed about being far away from home or being somewhere that I was unfamiliar with, but I think the last year showed me kind of like the importance of being happy in your surroundings and comfortable with where you are, because if you're spending so much time there, it's important that you're happy, especially this year. So I ended up taking my offers for Cambridge and Exeter, and I guess the main reason why I ended up picking Exeter as my insurance was I know the area really well. I spent a lot of time there when I was small, and it kind of did feel like a bit of a second home already. But then after that, yeah, it was a pretty long waiting, lots of waiting, because the schools closed in March and then we couldn't sit exams. So, but they didn't bump results date any earlier. They were going to. The government said they would put it in July, but they kept it. So then on the 13th of August, I logged on to UCAS and found out that I got into Cambridge. I got my grades. I finally got my EPQ result as well, so very pleased about that. So the grades I needed for Cambridge were 2 A stars and an A, and for Exeter it's 3 A's, which is pretty standard for medical school in the UK. You need 3 A's, that's kind of the average offer. From like getting work experience to personal statement to volunteering, and then like extracurricular stuff, doing reading, studying for your exams, you know, you've got mocks coming up, and still having a life. Like year 12 and year 13 are hard if you're applying to medical school, but you'll learn so much about yourself as a person in the process. So right now it's January, oh my gosh, 2021. I started my application process, so I sat my UCAT in July 2019, so nearly 2 years ago now. Such a different world back then, but I don't think I've changed that much, to be honest. I mean, a year and a half, but we didn't do anything last year. Last year, like, didn't exist. And although Cambridge and medical school might not be how I imagined it to be, You know, everything's online, not doing dissection this term, there's not much face-to-face interaction. It's quite different, but I wouldn't change it in terms of would I take a gap year, would I change anything in my application. And what I want to get across from this video is that, yes, it's hard, it's a long process, but at the end of it, you can find happiness. And there is an end, it will end, everything is temporary, as I keep reminding myself in this COVID world. Everything is temporary. But for now, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of my process, where I applied, kind of the timescale of everything, because I think another thing I struggled with or found a bit frustrating when I started was not knowing exactly when I was going to hear back and how long the waiting would be. So hopefully you guys now realise that like it's not all really quick and over. It takes literally like a year from start to finish. I mean, in fact, it's longer than that. You start preparing for the UCAT in like June. You don't get your result until August the year later. So it's over a year. And I guess I wish I'd appreciated that more when I started. But yeah, that's my application story in a really brief snippet. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.